Ever feel like someone or something is watching you when you're completely alone? The kind of stare that crawls under your skin and won't leave, even when you know it shouldn't be there. I've heard stories about shadows moving in empty hallways, about strangers who aren't strangers at all, but nothing prepared me for what actually happened. These are real experiences from people who work alone at night, where the silence isn't comforting, it's waiting. And once you hear what happened to them, you'll never look at a quiet night shift the same way again. I still remember that night like it happened yesterday, even though it's been over a year. It's not just the fear, it's the disbelief, the sick realization that someone was in the same building as me, wandering freely, while I didn't even notice at first. The memory makes my stomach turn, and even now, I can't explain why he was there or what he was planning. All I know is that it was terrifying. I worked the night shift at a small hotel in a sleepy town. The kind of hotel that barely sees 10 or 15 guests on a weeknight. Only 3 floors, maybe 40 rooms total. I usually worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which was perfect for me because the work was slow, almost boring. Most nights, I'd sit behind the desk, check the cameras, handle a little paperwork, and scroll through my phone if nothing was happening. The lobby was tiny, just a desk, a couple of couches, a TV, and some vending machines tucked in the corner. Behind the desk was a small office with a computer and a chair, separated from the lobby by a glass window. I could see everything from there, but it also gave me a sense of safety, a little bubble where I could hide and still monitor the hotel. At night, the doors automatically locked. Guests had to buzz in, and I'd press a button to let them through. Usually, nothing happened after midnight, except maybe a late check-in or someone returning from a long drive. I liked the routine. It was quiet, uneventful, predictable. Until that night. It was around 11 p.m. when he first appeared. The door buzzed, and I pressed the button. He walked in like any other guest, mid-40s tall, kind of lanky, wearing jeans and a baseball cap, carrying a backpack slung over one shoulder. He didn't seem out of place. But then he looked at me. Not a glance, not a casual look, he stared. Just stared. For maybe 3 or 4 seconds, long enough for me to feel it in my chest. It was a blank expression, almost like he was studying me. "Hi," I said, forcing a smile. "Do you need a room?" "Yes," he said quietly. I gave him the price, and he nodded, pulling out a card. I swiped it, it went through, and I handed him a key card for room 214. When he took it, his eyes lingered on me. Too long. It was unsettling, but I shrugged it off at the time. People look at you weird sometimes. It didn't always mean anything. He turned and walked toward the elevator. I watched him go, then returned to my phone. About an hour later, I looked up and froze. He was back in the lobby, sitting on the couch, not using his phone, not reading, just sitting there, staring at the blank TV. I thought maybe he couldn't sleep, so I ignored it. But then 30 minutes passed, and he still hadn't moved. He wasn't dozing off, wasn't fidgeting, just sitting perfectly still, staring straight ahead. I got up to grab water from the vending machine, and the moment I stepped across the lobby, I felt it, his eyes on me, following me, watching every move. I didn't meet his gaze. I couldn't. It was wrong. At 1 a.m., boredom, or curiosity, made me check the reservation system. That's when I noticed something impossible. Room 214 showed as vacant. My heart dropped. I double-checked. Nothing. No name. No payment. No check-in record. I mumbled under my breath. No, that can't be right. I checked the transaction screen. Nothing. The card I swiped an hour ago. No record. I picked up the phone and called room 214. 10 rings. No answer. Then I checked the keycard entry log. No activity. None. He had never entered the room. I looked over at him. He was still sitting on the couch, watching the TV that wasn't on. My chest tightened. Something wasn't right. I debated what to do. Part of me thought maybe the system glitched, but the facts were clear. He wasn't a guest. I watched him, trying to stay calm, trying to make sense of it. At 1:30 a.m., I walked over. "Everything okay?" I asked. "I just can't sleep," he said, voice low, calm. He turned back to the TV. I nodded and returned to my desk, hands shaking. By 2 a.m., he was no longer in the lounge. My stomach sank. I scanned the lobby. He was at the end of the hallway by the bathrooms, half hidden in shadow. I pretended to work at the desk, my eyes glued to him. He moved again toward the vending machines, the elevators, always watching. Every step calculated, deliberate. I call my manager at home. Keep an eye on him, she said, her voice tired. Call the police if he does anything threatening. By 3 a.m., my nerves were frayed. I checked the security cameras. He had been walking the first-floor hallway, stopping at the end, standing for minutes before returning. Later, he spent 10 minutes in the stairwell. Later, near the vending machine. Later, again in the lounge, staring. Always staring. Finally, at 3:30 a.m., I called the non-emergency police line. Explained everything. Officers were on the way. While waiting, he walked closer, only 15 feet from the desk. Staring. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, didn't move except to follow my gaze with his. Around 3:50 a.m., another guest arrived. I buzzed him in. He watched, studied them, like a predator analyzing prey. Minutes later, he disappeared from the cameras again. I saw him standing outside a guest room door on the first floor. Waiting, watching. My hands trembled. I dialed 911. He's outside a guest room. I don't know what he's planning. Police arrived at 4:10 a.m. 2 officers. I pointed at him in the lounge. They questioned him. He had no bags, no reservation, a stolen card. He was trespassing. They charged him, escorted him out. I stayed behind the desk, shaking, watching the monitors, expecting him to return. That night, I realized something chilling. He had been in the hotel for hours, watching, waiting, never intending to check in, never intending to leave without observing. And I had been none the wiser until the system glitch and my own attention had caught him. I don't work night shifts anymore. I avoid small, quiet hotels after dark. But even now, when I think of him, of those eyes, of the way he studied me, I feel that chill crawling up my spine. Because no one should be able to wander freely in a building at night, unnoticed, while their intentions remain a mystery. And yet, that's exactly what he did. Even now, I wonder, what was he really after? My name is Meredith, and I work the overnight shift at a tiny gas station off County Road 11. The kind of place most people don't even notice unless they're out of gas or lost in the middle of nowhere. I took the job because it was quiet and predictable, or at least I used to think so. It was a Thursday night, just after 1 a.m., and the air outside was wet and still. The fluorescent lights above the pumps hummed low, and the kind of silence that should have been comforting started to crawl under my skin. I was about to microwave a cinnamon roll I didn't even really want when the door chimed. I looked up, and there he was. A man, mid-40s, messy hair, dry lips like he hadn't smiled in years, wearing a green coat that looked 2 sizes too big. He didn't walk toward the coffee or the snack aisle like most customers. He stopped in front of the counter, just staring at me, like he had memorized every detail about me before even walking in. "Hi," I said, forcing a polite smile. "You always work this late," he said, calm, almost amused. I froze. My name tag wasn't even visible, yet he knew it. Yeah, mostly," I stammered. He smiled, a small, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, and then, as casually as if he owned the place, he said, "Meredith, right?" My stomach dropped. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Yes, how do you know that?" "I just noticed," he said, glancing at the whiteboard where I'd scribbled some notes about coffee flavors. "Nice handwriting. Careful with your dots. Little slashes. Very specific." I blinked. That was creepy. He introduced himself as Paul and left, disappearing into the foggy night outside. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he just liked paying attention. But he didn't leave. Over the next few weeks, Paul started showing up more often. Not every night, not enough to scream stalker, but enough that I stopped assuming it was coincidence. Sometimes he'd come in, sometimes he'd just sit in his car at the edge of the lot with the lights off. My heart would race every time I noticed him. One night, I tried to ignore him. He bought a bottle of water, lingered, and said softly, "You're quieter tonight." Long shift. I muttered, trying to sound indifferent. He leaned on the counter. "It must get lonely. Just you out here, no one else for miles." I stepped back. "I'm fine," I said. But I wasn't. Ever get scared being a woman alone at night? His voice wasn't threatening. That was what made it worse. It was curiosity, neutral, observing. I swallowed. "Do you need anything else?" He tilted his head. You always lock the back room door. Around 2 a.m., almost every night. Smart. I noticed. My stomach turned. I'll let you get back to work, he said, smiling softly, apologetic. Didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. After that night, I started carrying my keys between my fingers when I walked to my car. I kept a tire iron under the counter. I changed the curtains in my apartment. I locked the bathroom door, even when I was home alone. Then came the Polaroid. I had just come back from a 10-minute break. On the counter was a photo of me refilling the windshield washer bin behind the station. Close up. Way too close. No note. But someone had circled certain words in red ink. My blood ran cold. When Paul came in next, I told him if he stayed, I'd call the police. He didn't resist. He just nodded and said, I just noticed things. I'm curious. The police came quickly after that night. They found his notepad, pages filled with dates, times, notes about me, my shifts, my walks, my groceries. One page had my name written over and over until it became indecipherable scribbles. A restraining order went through that week. I quit nights, moved towns. But even now, when I see headlights lingering behind me, my neck tingles. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. It happened again, this time with a different scenario. I had been working for only a couple of months in news station, still overnight shifts. A Thursday night, around 2:30 a.m., a coworker, Max, and his friend Ben came in for coffee. They had taken magic mushrooms a few hours prior, so they were giggling and wandering. But what they told me next made my heart sink. A car had been parked in a lot, lights off, engine running, for over an hour. Someone inside was watching them. Ben went over to ask why. The man pretended not to speak English. When confronted again, he switched to English, panicked, and drove away. But another car pulled in immediately after him, following his lead. Both cars looked brand new and had no plates. My mind raced. I realized that if Max and Ben hadn't been there, I could have been completely alone with whoever was inside that car. I worked the rest of my shift with a knife in my pocket. Every time I stepped outside to change the trash, I was terrified. Then it happened again. The same car, 2 nights in a row. Same description, parked in the same corner that couldn't be seen from the register or front windows. The paranoia I'd hoped was irrational was suddenly justified. By this time, my nerves were shredded. Every customer made me jump. Every shadow outside felt like a threat. And then, at 3 a.m., it happened again. 4 men came in, asking about the car in the lot. Same description, same behavior. They had noticed someone watching them, arguing in the car, then another vehicle following. I told them, trembling, that it sounded like the same cars from before. That same sinking feeling filled my chest. I was not alone, and whatever was happening outside, I didn't know if it was safe. The men stayed a few minutes to make sure nothing happened. They topped off their coffee for free and left. I was alone again, but the sense of being watched didn't go away. Every time I looked out the window, I half expected to see headlights slowly moving toward me, waiting. And I knew that next Thursday, or the one after, it could come back. Because some people don't leave. I never considered myself easily scared. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, and the kind of horror people described online or in movies felt distant. Until last fall when I decided to take a solo weekend trip to the mountains. I rented a small cabin deep in the Pine Hollow Range. Nothing fancy, just a wooden structure tucked away from the main road, surrounded by thick pine trees and the quiet crunch of leaves underfoot. The nearest town was about 25 miles away, which meant no cell service once I drove past the last intersection. Perfect, I thought. Perfect for reading, writing, and disconnecting from everything. I arrived just as the sun was setting. The sky was streaked with orange and purple, and the air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. I unloaded my bags, locked the door behind me, and started a fire in the stone fireplace. I had a small wood stove in the kitchen, and the cabin was cozy with a loft for sleeping and a small living area. Everything felt safe and quiet, too quiet. The first night, I didn't notice anything unusual. I made dinner, read a few chapters of a book, and went to sleep around 11 p.m. I kept the cabin lights low and the fire burning. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to a faint sound. A soft knock, not at the door, not the window, but somewhere else. like wood tapping against wood, slow and deliberate. I froze. My heart was beating fast. Maybe it was an animal? I told myself that. The cabin floorboards creaked, I thought, and pine trees scrape in the wind. But the sound came again, 3 knocks, rhythmic, deliberate. I grabbed my phone. No signal. I got up and grabbed a flashlight I always keep on my nightstand. The beam cut through the darkness, bouncing off the wooden walls. I checked the front door. It was locked. All the windows were shut. Nothing. I went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the cabin sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind rattled the shutters like someone was trying to enter. The next morning, I chalked it up to nerves. I made coffee, looked out the small kitchen window, and told myself I was overreacting. There was no one here, just me in the mountains. I decided to hike the nearby trail, about a mile from the cabin. The forest was dense, mist hanging low, and the path slippery with wet leaves. I kept my phone in my pocket, using it only for GPS. About halfway up, I noticed footprints in the mud. Not animal prints, human. Large, heavy boots. They weren't mine. My stomach dropped. I followed the trail briefly. The prints didn't belong to anyone in sight. They ended abruptly near a cluster of trees. I turned back, tried to convince myself it was someone from another cabin, a hiker who had passed through. When I got back, the cabin looked the same. Nothing seemed out of place. The door was locked, my bags untouched. But then I noticed something on the porch, a single boot print in the dirt. Clean, recent, right in front of the door. That night, I double-checked every lock. I placed chairs against the door and windows. I slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow, fire burning low. Around midnight, the knocking started again. Soft, deliberate. 3 taps. I waited, heart pounding, flashlight in hand. Then I saw it, a shadow moving past the loft railing. My breath caught. The cabin was supposed to be empty. I shined a flashlight across the room. Nothing, but the feeling of being watched was suffocating. I grabbed my keys and tried the door. Locked. Still. The knocking stopped. Silence. My nerves were raw. I sat in the living area, trying to calm myself. The fire crackled, the wind whistled through the pines, and for a few minutes, it felt like I might get through the night. Then I heard the breathing. It wasn't mine. I knew it. Low, raspy, deliberate, coming from the loft. I froze, listening. The air in the cabin seemed to thicken. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold a flashlight. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. I edged toward the stairs. Every step creaked. I gripped the railing, eyes darting. At the top, the loft was empty. Nothing. The bed untouched. My backpack still where I left it. I felt a tap on my shoulder. I spun around. Nothing. My pulse was racing, vision blurred, my mind screaming at me that someone was here. I ran to the living area and slammed the door shut behind me. Sitting against it, knife in hand. I waited until sunrise, too scared to sleep. The next day, I considered leaving. But something held me back. Curiosity, stubbornness, or maybe the illusion of control. I decided to investigate further. I found small signs, smudges on the window, dirt by the back porch, a tree branch broken near the trail. Someone had been watching me, following me. That night, I stayed up again. Around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps on the porch. Soft pacing. I didn't move. I could hear him breathing, slow and deliberate, waiting. I wanted to scream, but fear paralyzed me. Then the door handle rattled. I leapt up, knife raised. The door didn't open. The handle rattled again, harder this time. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it at the door. No one. I checked the windows. No one outside. But then, reflected in the glass, I saw a shadow behind me. I spun. Nothing. The knocking started again, 3 taps. Then silence. I stayed in that cabin for 3 more nights. Each night, the footsteps, the tapping, the shadow in the loft. No one ever made direct contact. No one ever spoke. Just watching, waiting. On the final night, I stayed in the living area, every lock double-checked. The knocking started at 12:47 a.m. 3 taps. Then a pause. Then the sound of heavy breathing. I turned on every light, shining my flashlight at every corner. The cabin was empty. I left the cabin at sunrise. I didn't pack. I didn't sleep. I drove down the mountain without looking back. When I returned the key to the rental office, the manager frowned. "Everything okay?" she asked. I forced a smile. "Yes. Great, actually." She hesitated. "You know, the last person who stayed in that cabin left in the middle of the night. Didn't say why. Police found nothing." I nodded, heart sinking. "I've never been back, and I never will. Sometimes, when I'm home at night, I hear a soft tapping at my window, just enough to make me wonder, was he still out there, watching, waiting?"